Brawls. This is Board Game Brawl. My name is Nick, and today we're taking a look at, oh man, a book. Books are boring. Well, okay, not this one. This is Star Wars Edge of the Empire. This is the newest incarnation of the Star Wars tabletop role-playing game. It's designed by Jay Little and published by Fantasy Flight Games, who have been dabbling more and more in tabletop role-playing with all the Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k books that they have been releasing. Maybe some other ones I don't even know about. But anyways, there was another incarnation. There's a few different incarnations of Star Wars tabletop role-playing. There was one a long time ago. I can't even remember the company. That was pretty crazy. And there was one just in the earlier 2000s that was put out by Wizards of the Coast using, I think they went from D&D 3.5 rules with one rule set, then they went into the beginnings of 4th edition rule set. I don't know, they weren't that great, but this one, Edge of the Empire, is pretty interesting. It's brand new, and this one, rather than just thrusting you into the shoes of some of the more popular characters and character archetypes of the series, in Edge of the Empire, as the name suggests, you are what's called someone from the Outer Rim. You're like, it puts an emphasis on the darker side of Star Wars, where you can be like a smuggler, a scoundrel, or something a little more noble, like an explorer just trying to explore the outer fringes of the galaxy. So it's got a bit of a darker edge, and some of the more underused assets of the Star Wars universe are brought to light with this game. But if you are a Star Wars fan but not used to tabletop role-playing, is this going to be enough to attract you to the game, this particular gaming genre? Or if you are a tabletop role-playing game lover, but we're never that interested in Star Wars and don't know if you want to commit to another RPG, is this going to be enough to entice you? Well, why don't we go ahead and take a look at it as best we can, because it is just a book. And then we're going to come back and I'll let you know what I think of it. Alright, so this is a tabletop role-playing game, which means that even though it's one of the more simpler and easier to use systems, there's still a lot to it. There is no way I'm going to go over every single rule about this game, and I'm probably going to make some little mistakes along the way, but I'm just going to tell you enough to give you a general overview of what you can expect from this system. So, this is the core book, which is what pretty much every player in the game is going to need. I guess at least if one player has it, definitely the game master at least, then you should be good to go. Very thick, very cool. There's a lot of really cool artwork in this book. Give you some examples. Hey, that guy looks really familiar. And basically, it's going to tell you everything you need to know how to play the game, how to make characters. There's a lot of valuable resources for the DM, or the game master, I should say, the GM. They have all kinds of stuff on starships and vehicles. Basically, it's just a very comprehensive book with everything you would need to know to not only play a character in this world, but have all the necessary equipment and all the necessary attributes to actually make yourself an effective character. Skills broken down one by one. That guy looks familiar too. Basically, this has all the flavor of the Star Wars universe, but in a much different type of setting. But before we go too further into the book, I want to explain how the basic dice system of this game works. So everything in this game, whether it's combat or negotiation or whatever, trying to pick a lock or do something mechanical, is going to be resolved with difficulty dice. Now, the green dice are the basic type of dice that the players and the GM are going to roll in order to resolve different types of checks. Now, there's different symbols on these dice. All of these little look like star explosion symbols count as successes. And there are different types. This one gives you 2 successes if you roll it. There's a blank face, of course. The other symbol on this die is the advantage symbol. And again, there are some sides that have 2 and some sides that have none. Now, successes are what you need, obviously, to succeed on whatever type of check you're trying to make. And the more of them you have, the better. Advantages are a little more nebulous. Now, advantages can be spent by the players or the GM to actually give yourself some bonuses after the check is resolved, whether it's for good or for bad, whether you succeeded or failed. They could be anything from relieving yourself of strain, which I'll get to a little bit later, doing special effects with your weapons. If you did succeed with a combat check, then the number of advantages might give you the opportunity to do a critical hit, and so on and so forth. And sometimes they can be used for more nebulous things having to do with the storyline. But the more successes and more advantages, the better for the players and for the GM and his NPCs. Now, eventually you might be able to upgrade those die to these yellow 12-sided dice, which have the same symbols. You have successes and advantages, but it's much more likely you're going to roll them. And it also has one more extra symbol, the triumph symbol. Now, the triumph symbol counts as a success, but also, above and beyond that, it can mean that something very, very good has happened to the players. It can give you an automatic critical hit, regardless of how many advantages you actually have. It could do something storyline-wise, like not only were you able to hop over that really high wall like you wanted to, but you did it effortlessly without using any strain, and you were able to hide while you were up there too, away from the stormtroopers who are chasing you. Something like that. So having the capability to have yellow dice instead of green dice is always good, and I'll explain how it's going to happen later. You have one last type of purely beneficial die, and that's these boost dice. And boost dice are going to be given to you whenever you do something to basically assist yourself in a check, whether it's a friend who's also skilled in the same check trying to help you out, or if you take aim with a weapon, you're going to be able to roll this. And it's not that great. There's two sides that are blank. It's just a 6-sided, and some sides only give you advantage. But it could help you out in a jam. The more of these, the better. Now, if that's all the game was, and if you were just rolling all the good dice, it'd be pretty easy and nothing bad would ever happen, and that'd be kind of boring. But fortunately, there's these happy little fellows, these difficulty dice. Now, you're going to be rolling these basically all the time. If the DM doesn't require you to have difficulty dice, then there's probably a check you're going to pass automatically. But most things will have at least a standard difficulty, which is 1 or 2 dice. I can't really remember, probably 2. And you're going to roll these along with the green or yellow or boost dice. And these have much different, much worse symbols. These symbols here are failures. Basically, every failure that you roll, if you roll nothing but failures or no successes, then you have failed at your check. But every failure also cancels out a success, and vice versa. Successes will cancel failures, failures cancel successes, yada, yada, yada. The other symbol on here is the threat symbol, and this is the mirror image of the advantage symbols. They cancel each other out, and if you have threats left over at the end of a combat, in other words, all of your advantages were canceled out and you've only got threat remaining, then something bad might happen to you. You take extra strain, you don't make your you take a penalty die in your next subsequent stealth check, something like that. So the less failures and less threat you have, the better. And there's a chance that those dice will get upgraded to the challenge die, which is even worse, a 12-sided die that has more failures, more threats, and the dreaded despair symbol, which is like the antithesis of the triumph symbol. It counts as a failure, so you might still succeed at the check if you have enough successes. But regardless, something really bad might happen to you, especially if you fail the check. That wall you were trying to get over, not only did you fail at trying to get over it, but you slid down, hurt yourself, and your backpack ripped open and spilled all your contents on the ground right when you're trying to hide from those stormtroopers. Not good. So you don't want any of the stuff on that die. Now, the antithesis of the boost die are these setback dice, which is that you've taken some sort of setback, maybe you sprained your ankle or something, and the GM is telling you to take a setback die. So you're going to have to roll that, and there's a possibility it'll give you more threat, more failures. Boy, that sucks. Now, you're also going to need a couple, well, maybe not you all the time, but you should probably have a couple of regular D10s, which you're going to use for percentile rolls and other kind of checks, especially if there's a critical hit, and for obligation, which I'll get to later. One last type of die to talk about, and that is the force die. Now, there's not a lot of rules for using the Force in this game, and in later supplements, when you actually introduce Jedi to the game, which they do not right now, just to tell you that ahead of time, this is going to be very, very important, obviously, because of the Force. But for now, what this is used for is for Destiny points. At the beginning of the game, every player is going to roll their Destiny die, and you're going to get either these little black dots or these little white circular dots, and however many total the players get, that's how many Destiny points that you have to use. I'm sorry, let me grab the little Destiny points so I can show you. I'll edit this all out in post, don't worry. So the Destiny points look like this. If you've rolled the little white circles, they're going to be up on the white side. If they're down, they're going to be like this. And you're going to have those out on the board in front of you, probably in front of the Game Master, however many you have. And these represent the very beneficial or very harmful extra bonuses that players and the GM may be able to take during the game. So just as it could do many things, but just as an example, let's say that you're in a very tough situation. The heroes need some help. They want to upgrade one of their dice. So they'll flip one of these over to the dark side, and they'll be able to make one of their green dice in a check into a yellow die. So that could be very helpful. Or maybe they really need that incoming TIE fighter to miss against their cruiser. So they flip one over, and they're going to make one of the GM's dice into a challenge die just to do it that little extra oomph that they need. But for everyone that you flip over, you're giving the GM more opportunities to screw you over, because he can flip the dark ones back over to light and do the same things to you, or just do something even worse. And it could also be kind of nebulous and have some effect on the story. You could do things like, okay, we really need rebreather masks, but we didn't remember to pack them, so let's go ahead and use one of our destiny points to say that we packed some rebreather masks. So it can be a very cool little thematic thing if you use them wisely. Just don't go overboard and be abusive with them. So that's pretty much how the dice system in this game works, but how does this all relate to actually playing your character? So I'm just going to use one of the introductory characters that they used in the introductory player set. This is Oscar the Bounty Hunter. So when you're doing character creation, obviously you come up with a name, you're going to pick a race, and you're going to pick a class, and then you have to go through all of your stats. Now the numbers up here are your attributes, and these are some of the more generic things you expect from role-playing games. You got your brawn, your agility, your intellect, your cunning, your willpower, and your presence. And you're always going to start off with a baseline that may be altered by your race's stats. They're usually somewhere, like all humans start with 2 and everything and so on. And Twi'leks get bonuses that the humans don't get. So those stats will be different, but generally the higher the number, the better. The reason for that is because these will directly affect some of your other stats. So for instance, brawn is going to directly affect the amount of wounds that you can take, and you have a wound threshold. If you ever reach or surpass this threshold, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're probably going to be unconscious and possibly dying on the grounds. Willpower is going to affect your strain, and strain is basically the amount of exhaustion you can take, either from doing strenuous activity or forcing yourself in battle to go above and beyond the call of duty. Now, you also are going to have a soak, which is going to be equal to the armor, special armor that you might have, and also your brawn, and that's the amount of damage that you're just going to be able to shave off whenever someone hits you, like with a blast pistol or whatever. But the other reason that all of your attributes are important is for your skills. The attribute number that you have is how many dice you're going to get to roll. So for instance, we have astrogation here, which is basically the ability to navigate your ship in space. Now this is based off of intellect. That's what that little thing in parentheses says. And you see that Oscara's intellect is a 2, which means she's going to roll 2 green dice in addition to all the difficulty dice she may have to roll. Now, she has the same kind of stat for athletics. That's based on brawn, and she only has a 2 in brawn, so she only gets 2 dice. But at the beginning during character creation, she took a rank in athletics, which means that one of those green dice is going to be upgraded to a yellow die. And that's basically how the system works. For every attribute number that you have, you're going to be able to roll that many green dice. And for every rank you have in that same skill, you're going to upgrade the green dice to yellow dice, which is always better. Now, if your attribute if one should ever surpass the other, it still kind of works out the same. So, for instance, if you start off with, if you've only got 2 willpower, but you have 3 ranks in, let's say, discipline, then all that means is that you're going to have 2 yellow dice and a green die. So it's always going to work out that way. And the other important stuff on your character sheets is going to be like your weapons. And your weapons, you'll basically just go to your die pool and you'll find the relevant skill. So the skill for this is skilled heavy. So whatever that is there, that's going to be your dice pool. Weapons will have a set range and damage. And you're going to do extra damage based on the number of successes that you roll. And you can possibly crit, like I said before, by having more and more advantages. And you can also have other extra stuff for your character down here. And you'll be collecting money and experience. And just as an example, I'm going to show you what a normal character sheet might look like. This is my character from the game. See, I have all the different skills here and all this extra stuff and extra stuff for that. And my character picture because I love Nausicaa. But anyways, that's basically how your character sheet's going to look and how all the dice are going to relate to your stats. But what is actually involved in creating
now
your
the
character?
book is going to guide you how to make your character step by step, and of course you're going to have to start with character background, which is, not so much has to do with your stats, but basically the story of your character, like where you're coming from and what you want he or she to do. Then you're going to have to worry about obligation, and this is a very cool feature that I haven't really seen implemented that well in other games. Obligation is basically all of the baggage you're coming into the story with. It could be, if you look at this chart over here, it could be everything from drug addiction to being betrayed by someone in your past to being blackmailed to having a bounty on your head. Usually it's something negative that you just have been dealing with, and now your party and the GM are going to have to deal with them as well. The reason why obligation is very important from a gameplay standpoint is because the more obligation that you and the group as a whole has, the more likely it is that it's going to interfere with whatever your mission is or whatever you're trying to accomplish during the gameplay. And the GM is going to make a sort of secret roll at the beginning of each game session to see if that actually comes into play, and it could be very serious if it does. But another cool thing that I like is that you could, if you're willing and if your party is willing to let you, take additional obligation just to get bonus starting experience and credits. But I would not recommend doing that, too much of that, even though I definitely did and I will do it again. So that's obligation. Then there's selecting a species, which of course is one of the funnest things, if that's a word, that you could do. There's all kinds of different species. You've got Bothans. You can be a droid, believe it or not. You can be a Gand, and you can be a boring old human. But unfortunately, much like other role-playing games, being a human is probably the best thing you can do because they're awesome. I don't know why that is. But if you want to be creative, you can do one of the others, and they all have different stats, different boosts to their stats. Start with different amounts of XP, and XP is basically what you're going to use to build your character after the starting steps. And there's all kinds of backstory. Here's more races you can be. You can be a Rhodian. You can be a rodeo clown? No, a Rhodian. Trandoshan, a Twi'lek, like the sample character I had, or a Wookiee. Of course they're going to let you play a Wookiee. Personally, I would have saved that for an expansion and made people pay for it, but whatever. And you have all kinds of the stats for what you're going to need to play as them. I'm not going to go into every little bit. But then you have to choose a career. A career is basically a class. It'd be the equivalent of being a fighter, a rogue, or a wizard in Dungeons & Dragons. And let's just run through those really quick. You've got the bounty hunter, which is very combat-based, obviously, and also a lot about tracking people down. And it's going to give you all kinds of little backstory on what you need to know to play a bounty hunter. And then you're going to get into your specializations. Now, every career has a specialization, which is basically something that makes you a little bit different than other bounty hunters in this case. Like, you could be an assassin, you could be a gadgeteer, you can be a survivalist. Then there's the colonist, who could be a doctor, you could be a politico, a scholar. You've got the explorer, which is the class that I am, and I like them quite a bit. And they're kind of jacks of all trades, and you can be a fringer, you can be a scout, which is what I am, you can be a trader, not traitor. The hired gun can be the bodyguard, the marauder, the mercenary, the smuggler. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that want to play the smuggler. Who can be the pilot, the scoundrel, and the thief. And the technician, who no one ever wants to play, but trust me, you really, really need one. The technician can be a mechanic, an outlaw, a slicer. And it's just going back. Now, what does all this stuff mean? So, first off, I should mention that not only your race but also your career are going to tell you what skills are going to be easiest for you to learn and what starting skills you have, and then together with your specialization you'll have access to even more skills. And you can learn anything you want during the game, but having them as a career or specialization skill makes it cheaper when you're using XP. And so it is with all this other stuff here. These are talents, which are basically special abilities above and beyond your skills. And you'll have to spend XP to gain these as well, and you're basically going to start off at the top and work your way through the tree. In other words, you can't go to the next step until you've actually learned the one before it. So as an example, on the Technician Mechanic talent tree, you start off with Gearhead, which is that you can remove a setback die per rank of this talent from mechanics checks, which could be very, very helpful. You could also have the cost to add mods to attachments, so not bad. And you see that down here that it costs 5. And you'll have a copy of this sheet, and you'll be able to check them off as you go. It's easier for you. And as you go, they'll get better and better. All the way down at the end for most of these will actually be able to give yourself a +1 to one of your characteristics or attributes, basically your ability scores, which can be very helpful. And it's the only way to do it after character creation, because you can't raise like anything like your brawn or agility after character creation. So eventually you can actually spend XP to take another specialization if you want, even in another career. So you can be an explorer, scout, assassin, I suppose. Although you probably wouldn't want to do that. Now, the characters are also going to have motivations, which are basically things that keep them going and give them some sort of goal or focus in their life. It can be friendship, love, boring, expertise, wanderlust, power. There you go. And then you could have specific causes as well, like religion, or, popular ones would be overthrowing the empire, or maybe even supporting the empire. That could be interesting and very divisive. But then you can also have relationships. I personally have a Gizka pet. You get bonus points if you know what a Gizka is. And then finally, you're going to do your gear and your appearance. All the little fun stuff that is going to help you be you. And then going through, it's going to explain what all of your abilities actually do. It'll have more precise descriptions of all of your talents. And then you get into the good stuff like armor and weapons, which have all the stats here. It's all very simple to figure out, although the layout of the book doesn't help you all that much. You're going to look at your starting credits, determine what you're going to get. And once you're done with all that, you basically have a character, and then it's just time to flesh it out story-wise. So that's the basics of Star Wars Edge of the Empire if you're a player, and for right now I am only a player. But a GM basically is going to follow the same guidelines for creating his or her NPCs and the rest of the characters that you encounter. And after that, it just comes down to crafting the world and figuring out what the characters are trying to do out there on the edges of the galaxy.
So, Star Wars Edge of the Empire is one of my first forays into tabletop gaming in almost a year now. I had been playing a few different games, mainly Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition, and I found myself just getting burnt out on it, and I got into board games in a much more hardcore way, so I just stopped. And this is the first one I've played since that time. And I was a little hesitant about it, because I have to say that I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. Don't get me wrong, I love 3 of the movies. I'll let you guess which 3 that I love. And, I'll always love them. Fantastic movies. I have nothing really that bad to say about them, but I would never consider myself to be a Star Wars addict or a Star Wars nut because, well, a lot of it has to do with being burned so badly by those other 3 movies, which shall remain nameless. And let me assure you that those have nothing to do with this book. They really whitewash all that crap out as best they can. You will not find a single mention of midichlorians in the entire book to put your mind at ease, or Gungans. But anyways, even having said all that, it's just like, if I was going to play a sci-fi setting, I'd rather play the new Shadowrun. So I did commit to playing Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised. This is a very cool little system. And I say a little system because, the book is big and grandiose, but it has a very simple feeling to it. A lot of people like to say that Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition was a gateway role-playing system that was very simple. I disagreed. Even though I didn't think it was tough, I was already coming from Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, so my mind was already in that mathy, number-crunching mindset. I found that it was kind of overbogged with rules and just too many needless things and just all power cards and blah, 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 blah. And to the point where I really wouldn't want to introduce anyone to role-playing with it. And Dungeons & Dragons 4th Edition overall wasn't that great anyways. This game is very simple to pick up, Edge of the Empire. First of all, the dice mechanic. I love that. I've always said before, I love custom dice in board games. And these are no exception. Now, you could go through the hassle of having just using regular dice of the appropriate sides and using whatever little chart they have in there to tell you which side does what. But having those custom dice is just easier and faster, and they look cool. And it's a very cool mechanic of, I love having ranks in your skills and that determining the number of dice that you have, but then having or having your actual attribute determine that. But the two of them together, if you've got like an agility of 3, that makes your heavy gun skill a 3 dice. But then if you put ranks in it, it turns them into better yellow dice. I think that's an awesome mechanic, even though it seems very simple. It's just a very cool way to do it, so that you're not doing as much number crunching and number optimization as in other role-playing games. So, it adds a really cool element because you're giving yourself an edge in battles and in negotiating circumstances. So if you have better dice, it's more likely you're going to succeed, but it's not guaranteed. It's very hard, in my opinion, with just the small amount of experience I've had with the game, to be overpowered. And going back to what I mentioned briefly, negotiation, this game can be as combat heavy as you want it to be or not. The game lends itself to both very easily because it's the skill system for resolving combat rolls is just as simple as for resolving personal negotiation and presence rolls and manipulation and deception, skullduggery, all that stuff. It all works very, very well. Same thing with the knowledge rolls. All that is really cool, and I like it a lot. The gear system is very simple. Everything about this game is just simple and streamlined, and I like it. What's not simple and streamlined is the rulebook itself. Now, it looks fantastic. There's great art. They didn't reuse any art from previous Star Wars. There's no still frames. I love that. But it's just a bad layout. It's hard to find things. The index isn't as comprehensive as it should be. There's not a natural flow to how the chapters are going through. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of hard to pinpoint one thing that I think they could have done better, but overall, I just feel it was kind of clunky. But I guess it's a testament to how good the game mechanics themselves are, that even though the rulebook is the most important thing in a tabletop role-playing game by far, we were still able to look past that and enjoy the game for what it is. Now, a lot of this has to do with whether or not you like Star Wars or not. If you don't like Star Wars, even though this is a much different shade of Star Wars, it's still Star Wars. I mean, I have that feeling, and we're running into stormtroopers all the time and Imperial troops. And I should mention that this takes place, well, depending on when you set your campaign, but the main storyline set forth in this book takes place after the first Death Star is destroyed, I'm pretty sure. So it's right there in the middle of the Rebellion era. So if you are not a fan of that, if you prefer the very old Star Wars, like Knights of the Old Republic, or if you want post-Rebellion era, like where all the latest books are coming from, or if for some godforsaken reason you actually like the prequel movies, you're not going to have a lot of luck with this book, but future supplements will probably take care of all of that, except hopefully the prequel movies. Please don't ever bother. Please. I love that they whitewash all that stuff out. I love it. So a lot of this is whether you're a big Star Wars fan or not. If you are a Star Wars fan, you should own this game already. If you're a Star Wars fan and you love tabletop RPGs, this should definitely be on your radar. You're going to have a blast. Even with, they don't have any kind of Jedi rules yet. There's a little bit of Jedi rules. You can be a Force-sensitive user. But honestly, they bring out the setting so well with the other character classes. I really didn't even want to be a Jedi that badly. I'd love to have a little bit of that Force-sensitive powers if my game master would allow it, but whatever. I mean, I think that's a testament to the game that it's a Star Wars game that doesn't need to have a lightsaber waving in your face every 5 seconds. So it hasn't brought me totally into the fold of being a Star Wars lover, but I'm enjoying the game. What can I tell you? I think that if you're a tabletop role-playing gamer who's looking for something a little bit different, maybe you don't want to commit to another edition of Shadowrun, check it out. You might be pleasantly surprised, at least by those cool dice. So, my name is Nick. This has been Board Game Brawl, doing a little something different this time, and I'm reminding you to get out there and game every day and in every way, even if it involves books.